topic for this week is pain. Yes, pain on Camino. Does the Camino hurt? Usually does for me. Let's talk about how to avoid pain and treat pain coming right up. So thank you, Malcolm, for your question on the channel this week. And your question sounded like a very simple one. It was, do you take painkillers? And I did answer that question directly on the channel. But as I answered it, I thought this is actually quite a long answer. It needs a fair bit of discussion, I think. So let's talk about pain this week. And I'm talking about, let me put some caveats in. I'm talking about physical pain. You may suffer a bit of emotional pain walking a Camino, and you may have specific things to deal with, like blisters. I'll put links to those two elements. Yes, I've got a video, I think, on dealing with emotional pain. We'll put links to those two videos at the end. This video is about coping with physical pain. And a major caveat, I am not a medical professional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some of the physical pain that I deal with on Camino, how I deal with it, how I avoid it. This is not meant to be medical advice, all these caveats, but it will give you a sense of how I cope with it, and therefore it might give you some ideas on how you might cope with it, or things that you want to discuss with your medical professional. So with all the caveats out of the way, let's start talking about pain. And I really just want to share about how I do keep myself going, and I'm going to talk about things like avoiding pain, simple treatments that I do myself along the way. I will touch on medications, not from a medical advice point of view, but what I do. And I'll also talk about accessing medical help while you're on Camino. So if you've been on the channel for a while, you might know some of this, but it would help with a little bit of background. So why do I know a bit about pain on the Camino? Because for my first Camino in 2015, I walked it very overweight, and I had overtrained and injured myself in the process. So I actually started the Camino injured, and that Camino was 800 Ks from Saint-Jean. So I was dealing with mainly Achilles tendonitis and knee issues all the way through. So that first Camino, I didn't do it the right way. I took painkillers and anti-inflammatories every day. I had discussed it with my doctor beforehand, so I was kind of doing it under medical advice, but you know, it wasn't the right way to do it. So let me give you an update now. So again, if you haven't been on the channel before, haven't been on for a while, I'm just sharing personal experience, but it's from walking, you could call it 4 or 6 Caminos. I've walked the Camino Frances 3 times, and then last year I walked the Via de la Plata, the Camino Invierno, and the Camino Fistera. 60 days on Camino last year. I think about 160 days all up on Camino. So, and a lot of that dealing with pain. So let me tell you how I avoid it and treat it. So first of all, avoiding pain. I'm a great believer in avoiding trouble. So what do I do to avoid pain? I think one of the things that catches people out, particularly on their first Camino, is that they start like a bit like a bull out of the gate. They start too hard, too fast. You know, they're walking too fast, they're walking too far on those initial days, and they end up getting injured. And I've seen that many, many times. Shin splints, you know, all sorts of joint problems, and they end up having to go home after a week or two. So avoiding pain for me starts with planning my Camino and planning my distances, my speeds. So I'm a bit of an over planner, but I don't follow the plans when I'm on Camino, if that makes sense. So for example, my last one, it was going to be pretty long, well over 1,000 kilometers. And I wanted to start out easy and make sure that I wasn't going to get injured in those early days, because I don't do a lot of training. So in terms of that preparation to avoid pain, one of the key things that I did, and this is very specific to me, but I made sure I reduced my body weight. I was very overweight, and I think I lost something like 18 kilos. A lot of it's gone back on again, unfortunately. But I lost close to 18 kilos before setting out. That made an enormous difference. all that reduced weight on the joints and so on. So, you know, if you're a chubby pilgrim like me, lose weight. It's the easiest way to avoid pain. So that was one thing that I did. I didn't really train much because I worried too much about getting injured in training. So I really focused on the weight loss. And also planning my distances. So literally on that last Camino, day one to Santa Ponce was 10 Ks, and then I went to Guyana, which I think was sort of like 12 or 14, and then Castilblanco. And so it was building up very slowly to my comfortable distance, which is between 20 and 25 Ks a day. So particularly if it's your first Camino, you know, I know you're keen and all the rest of it, but, you know, if you're starting from Saint-Jean, for example, that's a big day if you're going all the way to Roncesvalles, you know. Break up the day into two, break it into three, you know, whatever. So do start out slow, warm into it, and so on gradually. So that's like 101 for me, reducing pain in the planning. Make sure that you're sort of warming up and being sensible in those first few days. So when I'm on Camino, how do I avoid pain? There's a few things that I do, and it's going to sound like a heck of a complex regime, but it actually, you know, if you're a car driver, you know how you just drive a car without thinking, you know, and whether you're shifting gears or, you know, braking and indicating, you kind of do it, you know, almost without thinking, subliminally. I find walking on Camino, because I've done it a few times now, what I'm going to describe kind of just goes on automatically in the back of my mind anyway. You kind of get into the swing of it in the first couple of days. So what do I do when I'm walking? Stretching is probably the number one thing. And I will stress that what I'm talking about here is how I avoid pain for particular conditions that I have. So I tend to get Achilles tendonitis. I get shots for that before I go. I do get a bit of plantar fasciitis. I get shots for that before I go. I have bad knees. I have arthritis and bursitis and a torn meniscus in my knees. I've got a bulging disc, so I get back problems. So what I'm describing is how I alleviate pain with these sorts of issues. You may obviously have different issues. So stretching is the key. I stretch probably, I don't know, I do it without even thinking, 30 or 40 times a day. Now you might think, well, that's a lot of time stretching. It's just simple stuff, you know. I'll do those calf stretches, you know. I'll lean against the wall or a lamppost and stretch the calf. If I'm in the middle of nowhere, I just lean on my hiking poles and I'll stretch the leg out behind me and stretch the calf. That's really stretching, you know, the Achilles and the plantar and the calf muscles. I would do that at least 30, 40 times a day. And it's just, you know, like 20 seconds aside, just give it a little bit of a stretch. I do that before I start, when I finish. I do it before and after every break. Anytime I feel a little bit of tightness in the tendons and things, I'll do another stretch. If I'm coming to an uphill section, going uphill stretches the Achilles a little bit more. I'll stretch before I do that. I mean, if you've watched some of the videos that I've been sharing on the Via de la Plata, I did daily videos on that. I think it was on day 3 or 4 or something. I came to this quite steep incline. It wasn't long. It actually wasn't too challenging, but it was really steep. Just give you an idea of how I do this. Before going up that very steep hill, I stopped, I hydrated, had a few nuts. It was very hot, so I took some electrolyte. I did lots of stretches. I took my footwear off and I put in heel wedges. I've got these little foam heel wedges which take the pressure off my Achilles. Did all of that. I mean, it took, you know, a few minutes. And then I went slowly up this very steep incline, got to the top, no problems. Took out the wedges, had another drink, and so on. It just requires a little bit of thought. So stretching, I do loads of it, particularly, you know, calf, Achilles, things like that. I also do back stretches because of my back problems. I'll do those as soon as I wake up in the morning. I do it literally on the bed. What do they call those sort of cat stretches? You know, you put your hands out and arch your back up, and it's sort of compressing the lower back. I do those, you know, plenty of those in the mornings. I'll even do some of those sometimes while I'm walking. If I feel the back is tightening up, I'll do a few of those at the side of the trail. So stretching is probably one of the most important things that I do, which avoids problems and tends to avoid pain. Hydration, really important. You know, keeping all of your tendons and joints and things well hydrated is very important. It's going to reduce pain. Fueling your body. So again, last year was quite a remote Camino. So I'm just watching the clock because I sense I'm waffling. My camera will cut at 30 minutes. So it was quite a remote Camino, so I made sure that I had plenty of energy snacks, salty snacks and things like that through the day. Lots of breaks. I stop a lot. I mean, I stop to take photographs and videos and just to admire the view and talk to the animals. You know, that's all good. Chance for stretching, having a drink of water and so on. I use hiking poles every inch of the way. I'm a great believer in hiking poles. I don't think I could actually walk a Camino without hiking poles. It helps my back with posture. You know, I'm putting quite a bit of pressure through the poles, so it's taking weight off my knees and tendons. That's really important. And one of the things which people talk about a lot about the Camino, and I've talked about it a fair bit, is listen to your body. Now, what does that actually mean? This is a little bit like these subconscious decisions you make when you're driving. Without thinking, I'm constantly listening in to how my body's performing. So because I know I have Achilles problems and plantar problems and knee problems, I'm kind of, you know, it's a little bit like a pilot scanning the instrument panel, isn't it? You know, I'm constantly just sort of checking in and seeing how they're feeling. And that's really important because as soon as something starts to niggle, I want to know why. So, you know, I might be getting a little bit of pain below, I get a bit of pain below my left kneecap, for example. You know, that'd be getting a bit painful. I'm thinking, what's causing that? Have I had plenty to drink today? You know, have I had a salt tablet today? And I'll be thinking, you know, am I carrying extra weight? You know, sort of going through a little bit of a diagnosis in my mind, and then I'll be thinking of different ways to alleviate that before it becomes too painful. And one of the things I might do is stop and I carry a little foam roller. I might, you know, roll my shins a bit, do some stretches, that kind of thing. So most of the time, 99% of the time, I'm sensing as the sort of pain is starting to occur. I'm kind of working out in my mind, you know, what might be the cause of that, and I'm doing some sort of treatment like, you know, stretching or whatever to make sure it doesn't get any worse. And 99% of the time that works. So, you know, Malcolm, your question about painkillers really are the last resort, and I'll talk about those in a moment. What else have I got on my list? So yeah, listening to the body. That's really important. And I think I've talked about this before. You know, I have this routine in the first sort of 20, 30 minutes of walking where I consciously check in. And I might start with the feet, literally, you know, how are my toes going? Any rubbing going on there? Any sort of potential hot spots? No, that seems all right. I'll work back, you know, how's the plantar fascia feeling? Yeah, that's all right. Maybe do some stretches. How are the Achilles feeling? How are the calves feeling? How are the shins feeling? How are the knees feeling? Most of the issues that I get are in the sort of lower limbs like that. Don't really sort of get thigh problems, hip problems, lower back. I'll be getting a sense of how is that going? Am I walking with a good posture, or am I causing problems there? Sometimes, you know, I might get neck stiffness, and you're just kind of working through and checking in like that, particularly during the first hour or so. So that's really kind of what listening to the body is. It's not just listening, it's acting. So taking action to help alleviate any problems. So let's talk about the treatments a bit. You know, if I find that I'm starting to get pain, stiffness, what do I do? So as I'm walking, I'm trying to work out what the cause might be. Did I not stretch? Have I not had enough water? And that sort of stuff. And then I'll sort of go through a bit like fault finding on your car, and I'll try what I think is going to alleviate it. So, and this is by trial and error. I'll do some stretches. That generally helps me quite a lot. If I haven't had any electrolytes for a bit, I don't want to digress too much, but on my last Camino, I used some tablets called salt sticks, which are, they're not just salt, they're like a complete electrolyte balance thing in a capsule. I tried those out and I took 1 or 2 a day, and I think they really helped me a lot, to be honest. Some people will say, oh, you don't need electrolytes, you know, you're not doing a gym workout. Well, I don't know. Experience tells me that I feel better taking them, so I might try, excuse me, taking electrolytes. If you've heard that acronym RICE, for, you know, lower leg pains and things, let me see if I can remember what it stands for. RICE: rest, ice, compression, and elevation. Sometimes it's a bit hard to get ice in the middle of nowhere, but certainly I'll have a break. I might put some compression bandage on. I do carry knee braces. They're just very simple elastic knee braces. I didn't use them a lot on my last Camino other than the last few days. So there was a 60-day walk, and I think about day 57, I was very silly. I was coming down a slope, and I was, you know, full of the joys of spring and a bit overconfident, and I wasn't using my poles adequately coming down the hill, and I just knocked a knee out, and oh, that was very painful for my last 3 days. So I used knee braces then. So I do carry stuff like that. What else do? I make really, and I bang on about this a lot, but I really make sure I'm taking on enough water. You know, let me stress again, I'm not a medical professional, but I've researched a lot online about, you know, nutrition and hydration and things like that for hiking. I practice a lot of what seemed to make sense to me, and it seems to work for me. So that's kind of, you know, it's just experience based. But I find as soon as I start to even mildly dehydrate, I start to get joint pain. So I probably carry a bit more water than most people do, and I really make sure I stay hydrated. If you don't know how to check if your hydration is okay, just look up urine dehydration color test or whatever. You'll see color charts, and it's a very simple test. When you pee, just check the color of your pee. The darker it is, the more dehydrated you are. The clearer it is, the more hydrated you are. It's generally never sort of totally clear. I think you can technically be overhydrated, but as you start to get that dark color, you're really dehydrating. So get some water on board. So treatments, water. I might use my foam roller to you know, do a bit of massage. I've talked about the supports, knee braces and things like that. I've in the past used compression socks, those sort of very high compression ankle socks and things. I haven't used them recently. Reducing weight was on my notes, I'll mention it again. And of course, you know, one treatment, if you like, or one reaction to severe pain could be cutting your day short. So I really try to avoid that. I don't think on my last one I cut a day short because of injury or pain. I try not to. You know, not that I walk through pain. I try to avoid the pain and treat it so it doesn't get too bad. But, you know, ultimately you could cut your day short. Okay, let's talk about medications. Again, this is not medical advice, but just what I do. So on my first Camino, I was very worried about managing pain, and my doctor was great. She told me how to use painkillers and anti-inflammatories, and you know which ones had to be taken with food, and how regularly to take them, and all the stuff that can happen if you take them too much, and that kind of stuff. So I felt very well sort of educated on that. So I always do carry painkillers and anti-inflammatories, but I use them as a last resort. Why? I suppose that first Camino experience where I practically lived on painkillers and anti-inflammatories for 40 days and nothing really seemed to get better. You know, it just got worse. I was in more pain and more strapped up and all the rest of it at the end. I think by the end of that Camino I was only able to walk about 10 Ks a day. You know, I realised that's probably not a good way to do it. So weight loss was probably 90% of fixing those problems. The other thing is I I came to the conclusion that it's better not to take painkillers and anti-inflammatories until I really have to. So I try all these other measures first, you know, the stretching, the hydration, the electrolytes and all the rest of it. Why? What worried me, and particularly because I've got very bad knees and I've got torn meniscus and arthritis and all the rest of it, is if I mask that pain too much, I could actually be causing damage and not realising it. Don't get me wrong, I'm no sort of pain hero. Certainly in the last 3 days of my last Camino, I did take some painkillers. The reason being that the pain was causing me to change my gait. And that's kind of this dilemma that I'm constantly grappling with. If I mask the pain, you know, I'm sort of covering that up and I'm going to continue walking and maybe exacerbate the damage. If you don't mask the pain, you may find that you're starting to limp or you're changing your gait, and in my experience that can cause additional problems because you're now using muscles in a different way and putting strain on muscles in a different way, and I found that that can cause me problems in the past. So it's kind of that balance. That's why I leave the painkillers till the last resort. It was quite funny on my final day of my last Camino, and if you've watched the sort of daily blog and videos and stuff, you might have seen it. I got to the point where I was like, oh, darn, you know, this is really getting painful. And I had about 15 Ks to go to Moshira, I think 15 or 20 Ks. And it wasn't so much a decision about will I take painkillers, it was which painkillers. So again, this was all on doctor's advice. So I had regular painkillers and anti-inflammatories, but I had these kind of super duper painkillers. I won't say what they are, which my doctor had given me and basically said, if the pain is too much and you have to kind of walk out to a bus or something like that, take these, you know, you'll get there. And it was really getting painful, and I thought, do I take those? And it's really going to totally mask the pain. But then I can't take anything else for 8 hours. Or do I take the less strong ones, which I can take every 4 hours, and so I could top them up? You know, it's kind of all this stuff was going through my head. In the end, I can't remember if I even took any. I think I took the lower dose ones, thinking, you know, if I need more, I can take more. And I was fine. But yeah, so I kind of do have meds with me. I'm not carrying loads of the stuff. I might carry, 12 painkillers and 12 anti-inflammatories, and I have half a dozen of these really powerful painkillers just as a backup. So yeah, that's why I sort of use those as a last resort. All on medical advice. The other thing that I want to mention is, we've gone through, prevention and then simple techniques like stretching and all the rest of it to avoid or lessen pain, taking some meds yourself. But the other thing, of course, is that you can access lots of help on Camino. And what do I mean by that? So the pharmacies, the pharmacia in Spain are fantastic. I don't know this, but I get the idea that there is a much higher level of training, maybe not training, but there's a much higher level of things that pharmacists can do for you in Spain as opposed to other countries. I'm not sure, but they seem able to give much deeper level of sort of medical advice. And of course, if you're on a Camino route, they're used to pilgrims limping in with all sorts of problems. So pharmacists, I've found, are a really great help, for all sorts of ailments. The next level of support, I suppose, is doctors. And again, doctors I have found in Spain, tremendous. So what you're looking for is the local health centre, which is the Centro de Salud. And any time I've gone into those 4 or 5 times. I went in twice, I think, on my last Camino, once or twice. Outstanding. Great service, fix you up, no problem. And it's either free or very cheap. It's a bit of potluck. So that's the sort of help that you can get along the way. And I guess that's probably pretty much it, actually, just looking at my notes there. So let's just kind of sum that up. Dealing with pain on the Camino, have a think about it. Think how you're going to, your strategy for dealing with it, because you're probably going to have to deal with it. You know, unless you're a super fit regular hiker. I'm just trying to think, you know, of all the people that I've met loads of people who've had lots of pain problems. Yeah, you know, on my last Camino, I buddied up with a couple of people, and yeah, they were getting blisters, and another couple of people I buddied up with, you know, were getting sort of knee issues. You know, occasionally I might come across with someone who appears to be not suffering, but most of us will be challenged to a degree, you know, with some sort of injury or pain. So think through how you're going to deal with that. Doesn't have to be a drama. Avoid it is the simplest solution. So, you know, plan your days carefully, particularly in the beginning. Don't push yourself too hard at the beginning. Don't overtrain. You know, if you're a bit overweight, get your weight loss program going. So avoiding it in the beginning is the best way. Don't carry too much, you know. And that's a thing I didn't mention. You know, if you're finding that you're carrying an injury, there's always an option maybe to send some luggage ahead for a few days just to get the weight off your back. So we've talked about, you know, avoiding it. Make sure that you're listening to your body while you're walking, and that you've got a few strategies in mind, you know, with how you're going to be doing stretching and hydration and all that kind of stuff. You kind of learn this as you go anyway. And then if, in terms of treatments, you know, are you going to have a few meds with you? Talk to your doctor about what might be suitable and how to use any meds that you might have. And then, of course, you've got help along the way, professional help as well. You'll get lots and lots of medical advice online, like me, trying to talk about, you know, giving advice on avoiding pain. Just be careful what you watch and what you listen to. I think we're all a bit guilty sometimes of, you know, getting our advice from Dr. Google. At the end of the day, you know, talk to medical professionals. You know your body better than anyone else. I'm just kind of sharing on, you know, what works for me and maybe give you some ideas. But ultimately, don't push, listen to your body, and deal with stuff as it arises. I think that's a critical thing, particularly with stuff like blisters. You know, if you think you're getting a blister, stop, treat it. Yeah, treat something straight away. I think that's really important. So, you know, if I'm getting muscle problems, tendon problems, I stop and I treat it. Okay, so hopefully that's been of some help. I'll add the links to 2 more videos in the description below, and I think at the end of this video they'll come up as links as well. One will be about dealing with the emotional ups and downs on Camino, and the other one will be how to deal with blisters. So again, how I deal with blisters is I avoid them. I've never had a blister on Camino. And funnily enough, I probably met about 10 people on my last Camino who said, "Rob, love your videos, particularly the one about blisters." So we haven't had any. So it would seem that the way I try to avoid blisters seems to work for most people. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully I didn't rabbit on too much. If you enjoy the channel, do, you know, hit like, give it the thumbs up, do subscribe. That way you get notified every time we have a new video. And do ask questions. I love the questions. It gives me ideas for videos. Thank you, Malcolm, for your question on painkillers. And I'll see you soon. Bye for now.